That's good.
All right. For our regular segment called the Dead Astronomers Society, I'd like to present tonight Clyde Tombaugh. And we'll jump into that. Clyde Tombaugh, I'll go through some things here, and I got a few pictures. He was a very famous person that I didn't know that much about until I agreed to do this talk, and hopefully you'll see some relevance in what he has accomplished. He was born in 1906 in Illinois. They moved to Kansas when he was a teenager and was raised on a farm in Kansas. The first telescope that he looked through was owned by his uncle. The first telescope that he ever bought was from Sears. That's where my first telescope came from as a Christmas present, also from Sears. So we've got that in common, and probably nothing else. He was dissatisfied with the quality of the store-bought telescope and decided to build one for himself. So in 1925, he built his first telescope. I can't promise you that this is a picture of the very first one that he built, but he built this telescope and more than 30 other telescopes in his entire lifetime, grinding and polishing the mirrors, or typically. But in 1928, he completed he'd done a few and completed a construction of a very accurate 23-centimeter reflector. And he built this using parts from a 1910 Buick and discarded parts from a cream separator. That farm ingenuity, just using what you have at hand there, I love that. In any case, he used this his accurate telescope that he made to create some very detailed drawings of his observations of Jupiter and Mars. He then sent these drawings to astronomers at the Lowell Observatory and asking for their comments and suggestions. What he got back was a job offer to come to the Lowell Observatory and to work as a junior astronomer. So this is at a fairly young age. I don't have a specific date there. Oh, I think it was 1929. Yeah. So that's quite a start there for somebody. He accepted the job, and one of the first things he was tasked to do was join in the search for Percival Lowell's Planet X. This is a planet that was unknown at the time, beyond Neptune, beyond the orbit of Neptune. Clyde Tombaugh job was to photograph a small piece of the night sky and then continue on to other parts of the night sky, and then come back several days later, take a picture of the exact same area and compare them. And look for anything that might have changed from the first photograph to the second photograph. And we'll see some of that here in a second. And anything that might have moved, stars don't move, planets and asteroids and comets are things that would move that he would be trying to identify here. It's reported that he photographed about 2/3 of the sky and spent thousands of hours looking at the photographs that he created to try to find something besides stars. And he was very successful at that. After 10 months, he discovered something that we now call Pluto. That he named it, and it was the planet X that he and others had been looking for. The existence of this unknown ninth planet was proposed by Percival Lowell, who theorized that the wobbles in the orbit of Uranus and Neptune were caused by the gravitational pull of this planet X that would be beyond the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. And he Lowell calculated the approximate location or hypothesized location of this hypothesized planet, I guess, and searched for more than a decade without success. That's Percival Lowell. However, in 1929, using the calculations of Lowell and W.H. Pickering, we heard about Mr. Pickering a couple months back from Terry. So anyway, when Tombaugh, he used their calculations, and on February 18th of 1930, a little more than 10 months after he started, he discovered the new planet that he named Pluto. It was using a new astronomical technique of looking at photographic plates combined with a blink comparator, or sometimes called a blink microscope. His finding was confirmed by several other astronomers, and on March 13, 1930, which was the anniversary of Lowell's birth, and also the anniversary of William Herschel's discovery of the planet Uranus, the discovery of Pluto was publicly announced. And this was the astrograph, I believe it's called, a telescope specifically designed for taking pictures, not really for observing through, that he used to take the plates of the pictures of different parts of the sky. And this is the blink comparator. Let's see if I can do this. There's a place on one side and on the other side for the photographic plates, and the optics are such that through this eyepiece in front, the images are overlapped and shown one at a time. And I'll try to simulate that here poorly in just a second. But this blink comparator is what he used to find the movement between several nights of pictures of the same part of the sky. This is a copy of the photographic plates from the astrograph camera or telescope a couple slides ago that he used to discover the planet Pluto. Now, I'm calling it a planet. Just a little side note here. That's the way I was brought up. That's what it was when he discovered it. So I'm kind of referring to it in that tense. We have another talk later this evening that'll debate or talk about whether this indeed is a planet or something else. So I call it a planet not necessarily out of conviction, but out of just respect and my history here. So these two photographic plates would be loaded into that blink comparator on the previous slide, and I'll try to simulate what he would see. There would be one slide, and then he could press a button or do something and look at the other one and go back and forth between the two looking for differences. And I'm just kind of going back and forth here. Now, can you imagine looking at this? I mean, there's hundreds of stars in this field. And one thing that I thought to do a little bit late was to get rid of the arrow that is pointing at the planet Pluto and showing its movement here from the first position on 6 days or so before the second picture. This one, I forget those exact dates, but sometime in January. So this is a simulation of the blink machine to try to find movement or changes in the star field. So anyway, like I said, it was kind of a poor simulation there, and just imagine how hard it would be to look at all of the portions that, without that arrow there. I wish I could have removed the arrow and had it be a little bit more like he had seen. When he discovered the planet Pluto, he had not yet even gone to college. At the farm back in Kansas, there was a disastrous year where there was a hailstorm and it wiped out the crop, and he had to work around the farm to get things back in order. Actually had to drop out of high school at one point. So he's discovered the planet Pluto in 1930, has not been to college yet. Some other interesting things about him are, with his discovery of Pluto, this famous astronomer became the first American and the only person in the Western Hemisphere to discover a planet. All the other ones were by Europeans or the ancients. Though he will always be remembered for his discovery of Pluto, Clyde did have a very colorful career in finding other things, especially with this method of looking for movement between the same star picture between different dates. He observed things such as galaxy clusters, star clusters. He discovered a nova, a couple hundred of previously unknown asteroids, and 2 comets. So he had a very good career on that point, beyond Pluto, which was his highlight at the beginning of his career. Following the discovery of Pluto, he did go back to Kansas and attended the University of Kansas, where he received a bachelor's and a master's degree in astronomy. After he enrolled in the University of Kansas, he was denied access to what I would call Astronomy 101, because the professor thought that having somebody in the class who had already discovered a planet would be too disruptive for the other students, and just a bit disconcerting for everybody. So they just let him skip over that one, I guess, and go on to the rest of his coursework. During the rest of his life, he did, during World War II, he taught Navy personnel navigation at the Northern Arizona University. He worked at White Sands Missile Range in the early 50s, and he's taught astronomy at New Mexico State University from 1955 until his retirement in 1973. In August of 1992, a scientist from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Robert Stahel, I believe, called Clyde Tombaugh requesting permission to visit his planet. Clyde later remembered that he told the scientist, the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab scientist, JPL scientist, that he was welcome to it, but that he was going to be in for one long, cold trip. And that call was kind of the start of a mission that became New Horizons, which was launched in 2006, and it's the first probe to go visit the planet Pluto. And there's the New Horizon, an artist rendering of New Horizon arriving at Pluto, I guess. It should reach Pluto in July of next year. And to honor the legacy of Clyde Tombaugh, NASA included a small sample of his ashes on the New Horizon robotic spacecraft, or space probe, and it's going out to explore Pluto and the Kuiper belt beyond that. So the probe will be there at Pluto in July of 2015 before continuing onward, and this will be making Clyde Tombaugh's remains the first to venture into interstellar space. So I thought that was kind of a neat thing, where NASA called him asking for permission to go visit his planet, and then sending him some of his ashes on the space probe that's on its way to Pluto as we speak. So that's my astronomer that I present this month. I hope that was interesting. It certainly was interesting to me, a lot of stuff that I did not know before. Any questions before I move on to the next one?
Not a question, but a couple of pretty brief comments. We had a member years ago who was very proud of having taken a course or two from Clyde Tombaugh in New Mexico State. He would tell you that, whenever at any occasion. And this guy was really interested in Saturn. But the other comment is that the symbol for Pluto is the letter P with a long descender, and at the bottom of it, it goes off at a right angle to be an L. Okay, so like PL Pluto. It really stands for Percival Lowell. Correct. Percival Lowell bankrolled that whole thing, and that was to honor him. And I don't think he was still living when Pluto was discovered. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he had died maybe 10 years before.
Yeah.
He was dead. Yes.
Yeah, but he funded that observatory. He was also kind of a peculiar guy. But he also he put that observatory up originally there at Flagstaff to get a better idea of Mars and the people on Mars because of the so-called canals and so on. But anyway, he's another topic.
He might be another astronomer on
Well, not
the presentation.
he had a lot of money.
Well, that's very fascinating that one of our members actually took a course from Clyde, and so that's kind of a neat connection there. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, we're going to move on to another topic. That segment that we call future astronomy, and in this segment we try to find something maybe that's new technology or using technology in a different way. And this is something that I knew virtually nothing about until a week and a half ago. A week and a half ago, I got an email followed that I didn't see until much later. But then a phone call from somebody, a news reporter from the WMC Action News 5 TV channel here in town, asking me what I knew about the fireball that was reported the previous night. And Freddie's waving his hand back there.
Let me tell you, they called me first. I was at French camp and we saw the two fireballs. It was like, I don't know, 11:30. We were taking pictures, images in French camp, and we saw that. Next day, he called me, and I gave you your number. I told him, you cannot interview me, you need to interview Tim, but he's there.
Well, now I know how he got to me. Thank
Yes.
you. At the time, I was in the car and was not aware of any fireball. I'd not been out observing or at French camp the night before. So I told him, I said, I'll be home in less than an hour and I'll see what I can find and I'll call you back. So I did just that, and I never could get back in touch with him. His voicemail, we went to voicemail. When I did finally get through to him through his the assignment editor, I guess, at Channel 5, he was already interviewing somebody else and putting together the story with somebody from the Pink Palace going on camera and talking about this. But what I wanted to do was share what I learned in the hour and a half when the reporter called me and what I found out on the computer when I got home.
Was it Dave Manis from the Pink Palace?
No, it was not. That's the only name that I know there. It was not him. I can't tell you who it was, though.
Because I worked at the Pink Palace for a while, so I know probably.
A fellow with glasses and dark hair. And when I saw the segment, I mean, they previewed it during the 5 o'clock newscast and teased it, I think is the word they used, saying, hey, stick around for the 6 o'clock news. We'll tell you about, bright light that you might have seen in the sky last night. So I was watching it, even though I wasn't part of it anymore, because I was too slow to call back or just didn't know what was going on when he did call.
Yeah.
And I was listening for Dave Manis, but it was not him.
Okay.
Like I said, can't tell you who it was, and I apologize for that. But what I did find, oh geez, I'm not used to a mouse, was a website that we'll go and look at. Let's see.
What's 10:30?
amsmeteors.org. I don't know that this is the ultimate one or the best one or anything like that. This is just the one that I came across. Seems pretty reputable and it was certainly very fascinating. And this is the American Meteor Society. And they're a nonprofit scientific group that's been around since 1911 with the goal of studying meteors and bright fireballs and the annual meteor showers and collecting reports. So this was the first place that I landed in trying to find out what the reporter was talking about. And what came up on the front page then is, I'll have to go back to the news and pull that up, the news section of the site. And what came up that day was 4 large fireball events over USA. Now, if we just scroll through the different news articles that they publish here, you know, they've got outlooks, you know, maybe kind of predictions for what's coming up, any meteor showers that are coming up, what are the phases of the moon. Here we have a single fireball across the eastern U.S., another one over Oregon and Washington. A lot of these are just outlooks, and here's one with 2 fireballs and a lot of single fireballs. So it was certainly, it caught my attention that there were 4 fireballs listed on this website. 3 of them were within an hour and a half of each other. They tag them by events. They take reports on the website and through an application you can put on a smartphone, and we'll listen to a video about that here in a minute. But event 2307-2014 was at the time witnessed by 30 people over these many states. So that's what the reporter was asking me about. Now, as we go look at the details, this was at the time it was written. The following day there were 30 witnesses. Now there's something like 170 reports.
You can add 3.
What's that?
You can add 3 more. We didn't report that, but we saw it.
You didn't report it? Well, you might still be able to. And you might want to after seeing this, because it's really kind of fascinating stuff. But so here they have a map. They noted in the article that it's very unusual to have 4 of them in the same night with large number of people reporting. A lot of times the reports are just from 1 or 2 people that saw something, and we'll see that here when we look at the reports. But these 4 shows kind of a path that they took in different parts of the eastern U.S. here that night. So let's go and look at the one that was seen here by Freddie down at French Camp. Okay, got a lot of information here and 175 reports. Freddie, I can assure you that it's not too late, because this morning it was 174. So there's been at least one person add a report since I was reviewing this morning. And certainly more than 30 that were reported just the next day when they wrote that news article. But all 175 reports are listed here and mapped with Google Maps with the person jumping up and down as you highlight their name, and a legend here to tell you what exactly it means, you know, what they saw, when they saw it. And I do that every time I scroll to the wrong spot. Let's go over here. Okay, and here's the more details about the reports, what time somebody reported it, where they were located, what magnitude it was that they estimate, and they make it easy to estimate that. We'll see that in a video here. But just scrolling through some of these, they were over many different states, but I like some of the notes that are on here. Glad to know it was a confirmed fireball, and I think instead of a UFO or something else. Caught my attention while somebody was driving. One person on here noted they were in their house and just saw it through a window. It lit up so much. Let's see here. There were several people that took pictures, and we'll look at a couple of those. Pretty cool, didn't expect it. That's kind of the nature of these things. Awesome sight. And one of them here had something to the effect that it was the neatest thing he'd ever seen in the night sky. So it's just kind of, I was learning a lot here. And I actually saw my first fireball 2 months ago when I was on vacation in northwest Arkansas. We were on a lake, it was pretty dark, and I was looking up and saw something. Instead of just a meteor going by and lasting a second or part of a second, and just goes away faster than you can blink, this one just kind of grew in brightness and grew and kept going, and the one that I saw lasted maybe 3 seconds, if I had to guess. I'd pay a little bit more attention now and report it, since I know about this now, but I saw it. It was absolutely stunning because I've never seen anything like it before. So I can imagine what you guys saw down at French Camp and all these reports here. So let's see here. What I want to look at is, back to their main menu here. Oh, and the frequently asked questions. This was a terminology that I was a little familiar with, but not 100%. It talks about what a comet is, an asteroid, something larger than 1 meter, up to a very large size. Meteoroid is 1 meter or less, that's floating around in space. Meteor is one, well, they say either an asteroid or a meteoroid, hopefully more likely than not the meteoroid, because the asteroid brings back memories of doomsday and such. Armageddon, I think, is the movie that I've seen a couple of times. But it's called a meteor when this enters the atmosphere and it's seen, emits light as it burns up, and either in the atmosphere or burns up partially and then lands on the ground. If it does land on the ground, then it's known as a meteorite. So that's the difference between a meteor and a meteorite. Meteor showers are events that occur at the same time each year when Earth passes through, typically, well, as they say, a concentration of debris, maybe left by a comet that crossed the Earth's orbit. And they all seem to, the meteors in meteor showers usually seem to emit or come from the same part of the sky, indicating their association with each other, with the comet that passed through. Anyway, they have a fireball listed as a meteor brighter than the planet Venus. That's certainly what I saw. That dropped my jaw a couple months ago. And then I think it's pronounced bolide, a large fireball meteor that explodes in the atmosphere. Now this is one you might have seen pictures of in Russia from a couple years ago. It exploded in the atmosphere, blew out windows, injured a lot of people with flying glass. So that was, there was certainly a lot of video of that, because it seems like everybody in Russia has dash cams for security reasons, but it also led to some very interesting videos for the bolide that came down in Russia. I think they've actually found some pieces of that. Let's see, now I want to look at the logs, fireball logs. We'll look at the ones in 2014. And just scrolling through here, the things I want to point out are most of these things, now I've kind of got some exceptions here at the beginning, but most of these are events witnessed by one or two people, reported by one or two people, certainly witnessed by maybe a lot more, but somebody that's actually taken the time to report them. When a lot of people report them, it's a significant event. And as we scroll down here, we see again the majority are onesie-twosies. We go back to the previous page, and let's see, I think we're going to have to go back to the page even before that. Yes, here we go. These are the four that were reported in the story on this website. The first one being 2305, 66 people reported that. That's up from 61 this morning. And the other ones, that same evening, 600 people reported the one up in the Michigan area and surrounding states. 175 in the Tennessee and surrounding states area. And then the last, the fourth one is 174 people reported. All on the same night. You know, if somebody had been paying attention in real time, as these people probably were, I might have thought the world was coming to an end as all these fireballs are coming down all at the same time. So it was a pretty unusual event, and I went through a bit of a learning here looking at these. Now, if we look at the, we've been here before, the 2307 was the one that was seen, Freddie saw a couple of them, so this was probably one of them that he saw, and certainly the one that the people in Memphis that called the news people saw. And here's a picture that somebody took. It just, you know, nothing very spectacular in the picture here, but it shows it's pretty bright and, you know, kind of grows in intensity and lasts pretty long. Now, some of these other things here, it's kind of hard to see even on this display, but this is like a dotted red light. It comes on and off. So what that tells me is that's an airplane with its one of its lights flashing on and off at regular intervals. And this one down here, probably the same thing, but the person got in Northwest Alabama, got a picture looking somewhat northwest of the fireball. Let's see here. If you look at a specific report, well, I see, it's a report that I'll look at. No, okay.
I have a certain question.
Yes, please.
How do they know when people are looking at the same fireball?
Well, they have software that compiles all this information, and I'll play a video here in just a couple seconds that will talk a little bit more about it. But a lot of it is just through computing power, and you know which direction, and based on all these reports. What I want to do now is jump to a NASA website. Actually, what I've got in my notes here is back to the story of the 4 fireballs. See, main website, news, and then 4 large fireball events. If you look at this one, they plot the trajectory or the location of it, starting in like central Tennessee, moving westward, staying in Tennessee most all of the time, but visible from a lot of surrounding states. As we scroll down, they have another map that shows the 4 events. They call it a heat map, I think. And it kind of shows like just the number of people that reported, where they were located, just in a graphical, visual representation here. You know, the one up here was maybe even brighter and reported by more people than the one over Tennessee. And then we have another photo that somebody captured of the fire, this particular fireball, and you can see it through the trees here. And still, even through the trees, it's pretty spectacular to have captured a picture of that. So now I want to jump over to a NASA website briefly. NASA has something called the All-Sky Fireball Network. Leave it to NASA to have some fascinating things and some good information online here. But this shows, this network consists of 15 cameras, 6 of which are placed in Alabama, Georgia, and southern Tennessee, and southern Carolina. So they're spread out across the country here. And these are, this is a picture of the camera that's deployed at these various 15 or so locations around the country. It's called an all-sky camera, black and white, very wide field that would take a picture of the entire sky, or video of the entire sky when there's no clouds. And using software that detects movements on the image that's usually pretty still, and they can bring up these images that have been recorded for these fireball events. So the one that we were looking at is from September 24, and the time of it was around 1:25 coordinated universal time. So it wasn't this first one. So let me scroll down. I know it's not that one because I looked at these, and these were the ones up in Michigan, I believe. And we scroll down here, and yeah, the fourth one that they've got here corresponds to the time of most of the reports of that one we saw on the AMS website. And several of their cameras, 4 of their cameras, captured this. 2 of them are worth looking at, I think. Well, it's downloading it. That's not exactly what I was expecting. But anyway, it just, let's see if we can look at it. So they had, you know, this was recording all the time, and then the software detected motion, and this is the one that was reported on that other site there. Another camera caught it as well. Several cameras caught it, and they have overlapping views, so they can kind of coordinate and tell which direction and create a path for it, or create a likely path for it. Here's another camera in Tullahoma that captured it. Play that again real quick. Okay, and let's see, back at the NASA website here, one neat thing is the summary of the event. And there's a lot of data here. And there's a screen back, there's a legend to tell you what all of this means, but the only thing that I really looked at here was the map, the position in the atmosphere. Now it's kind of hard to see, but this is the Mississippi River. This is the southern border of Tennessee, and right in here is Memphis. Just to kind of give you some idea, Mississippi, Alabama over here. And again, this corresponds to what was on the map of the AMS site. South central Tennessee, going westward and ending in also in Tennessee. So A lot of information, orbital position, I mean, all kinds of neat stuff here, but a little bit too much to go into right now. And if you really want to get into it, you can go back to the top here, and this is the legend telling you what every point of data is, what it means, what it represents there. So it's kind of neat to see this in two different places, one reported by the public and one recorded by NASA in their cameras. Okay, the next thing I have is a video. It's 11 minutes long, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to show it. I'll play it after the meeting if somebody wants to see it, or you can go on the website and watch it yourself. But let me see if I can, I've watched it a couple times, and let's see if I can cover some of the basics of it. I'm not sure actually where you find this on here. Videos maybe. Well, no, that's just videos of different fireballs. Anyway, to report things to the AMS here, you don't have to be a member. It doesn't cost anything. If you do want to become a member, it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to log in. You can just go and report a fireball that you saw. There's a couple different ways here. One is a very simple form to fill out online that asks for your address, and some things are required data with stars, latitude and longitude if you know it, date and time, direction, brightness and color, so on and so forth. Was it persistent? Did it have a terminal flash, like exploding at the end? Were there any sounds? And then other information or remarks that you might have and want to submit. So again, you don't have to be a member or anything to submit a report of a fireball. The other way is they've got this kind of online, little bit more interactive way of doing it, where it asks you these 12 questions and lets you point to maps and actually even end up using your smartphone to help show where you saw it in the sky. So you go through these 12 steps, and I'll just, what I'm trying to do is save us from the 11-minute video, but here it's just bringing up a central location in Memphis. You can zoom out and go to a more specific spot where you saw this, and then it calculates the elevation, latitude, and longitude, and then you go on to the next of the 12 questions, date and time. We won't go through any more of these, but where this ends up is an application that you can download to a smartphone, both Apple and Android. And I think it's one of the final questions that it's an optional thing. If you do have a smartphone and want to load this app, you load the app and press the start button, and then you get a countdown with your fake smartphone here, and you hold it up where you saw it in the sky. You don't have to be standing at the exact spot that you saw it, but you want to show the direction, because you've already input that information. If you want to show that this is where I saw it start, and it went about this speed across the sky, and it stopped right about here. And the smartphone will, I think I'll have to run through that a couple of times to collect the data and kind of average it to input it for study by this organization here, and some of the reports that were generated. So it's a really neat thing, something I didn't know about before, and something where I saw my first one, didn't really know what it was other than it's a neat fireball, not something like I'd never seen before. And then then we had this event where 4 of them happened. Freddie saw 2 of them. There's this reporting site, and I just thought this was a neat thing to share. Any questions about this and fireballs and reporting or anything like that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Do they, since there were 4 of them, do they think they were related? That is, first, were they, meteors rather than space junk? And given the trajectory, the directions in which they were traveling, I doubt they were space junk because rockets are launched to the east to take advantage of the Earth's rotation, or they're in polar orbit. So it's unlikely it would be going to the west. So probably, I'm thinking it was some celestial object but does anybody in the AMS or any other information suggest that there was a common origin of these 4 things? That is, a swarm or a parent body that broke up or something like that?
In my research, I didn't find anybody that was willing to make that association. And the closest thing is the map that shows them kind of in a, I believe, a common, well, not even a common direction.
No, there was one was
more or less from east to west, north to, or south to north are the starting and stopping of these. So I haven't heard anybody make, saying we went through a comet tail that we didn't know about or anything like that. So I don't have an answer to that question really.
If I can say something.
Yes.
Well, on the NASA site, I saw one part. It showed the approximated orbit of the object before it entered Earth's orbit. So you might, and it also showed the direction because these don't have arrows on their vectors. We don't know, which way they came from. But you can look at both of those and see, do they have sort of the same orbit?
Oh yes.
Whatever. And if they're completely different, then it's not the same source. But if they're similar, then it could be.
That's a great idea. I wish I had closed the NASA website, but it's something we can do after the meeting's over or at your leisure. To look at the orbit, that was one of the charts on that very graphical page there with the only thing that I showed you was the map. And yeah, you could see if they have the same orbit and, we're in some way related there. Thank you for that input. There is a video on here. If you're at all interested in this, there's a lot of information on the website, but the video kind of explained the reporting process and just how seeing some of these things are just extremely cool. And there's information on here about how to set up an all-sky, how to build and create an all-sky camera. Beside, if you want to get into this yourself. I believe that Freddie Diaz might have one set up at his house. Is that correct?
I had until it was hidden by lightning strike.
Oh,
That burned half of my house in the middle of the process. Burned half of my house too.
Is that right?
All the electronics were fried.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. So maybe you don't want to have one of those sky cameras.
No close to your house or connected to your house in any way.
Wow, that's something I wouldn't have expected.
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
if anybody wants to live dangerously, Rock Mountain has come out with an all-sky camera, very reasonably priced, and it's being shown a lot on the Night Skies Network.
Okay. Who came out with it?
Mountain Camp that I talked about last week.
Okay.
It's the same company, and a lot of the people on the Night Sky Network have set these up. They're not broadcasting on Night Sky Network, but they have their own web pages or YouTube sources or whatever where they are broadcasting live.
Okay. Well, very interesting. So it's a hobby that some people are really into, and unfortunately, some people suffer consequences of it being connected to the house there. But this is a good starting point for me to learn about things. Yes, sir.
I would not recommend to install the camera in Memphis because there are a lot of planes in Memphis.
Okay.
So the camera will always be confused with the planes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you will have to reduce your viewing angle to, I don't know, depending on where you are, a very small fragment of the sky that probably will never get a meteor. So.
Yes, you can thank one of our members who's a FedEx pilot for all of the planes, both the commercial traffic and the I guess that's also commercial traffic, but people traffic and package traffic. There are a lot of planes coming in and out of Memphis.
That's money, actually.
That's
Yes, don't complain about that at all.
Complaining in any way, shape, or form. It's just a fascinating thing, and there's the NASA All Sky Fireball Network uses a program called Asgard, and it was created up in Canada. Stands for All Sky Guided Automatic Real-Time Detection. And this is some software that NASA uses. It's not available to the public. And the Canadian people that came up with it, I think related to some university probably, use it to detect instead of having somebody look at hours and, hours of footage, it detects movements and kind of eliminates airplanes and fireflies and things like that. So there's instead of just the camera recording stuff, there's also some very sophisticated software that can be behind this.
There is a piece of software that is pretty cheap that does that. You tell it how many frames before and after an event happens. So based on the speed of your camera, you can select 2,000 frames or 200 frames. So it will take the whole event because it has a buffer of all the frames. And then it records it as a video file. So you don't have to even run anything. When you wake up in the morning, all the planes that went through FedEx are there.
Oh, so that one doesn't distinguish between planes.
Yeah.
That's why you don't recommend that in
Exactly.
Memphis here. But still, it was a fascinating thing for me to learn about, and it made the evening news even. It made the national news too, if I'm not mistaken. But I didn't see that. So anyway. The last thing I have is the What's Up from NASA. It talks about some upcoming events this month. It's only 2.5 minutes long. Planet. And to talk about that tonight are Sue Boulding and Terry Dowell. And I will turn it over to them at this point.
Good evening.
Let me get this set.
Oh, Tim, turn the lights down, yes.
Is that good, or do we need a little dimmer?
A little darker.
How do you dim those lights back there?
Just keep flipping.
There.
That's too much.
Turn the light right here.
No, that's the screen. And one of the switches, I believe, is the light up button.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Get a regular light show.
Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Pluto. We did this presentation back in 2012, I believe it was, and what we're going to talk about tonight is not so much a debate of is Pluto a planet or not a planet, but we're going to talk about, because since even that time, just 2 years ago, there's been a lot more investigation and a lot more information given, and so we want to just mainly look tonight at really overall what is a planet, and if Pluto is not a planet, then exactly what is Pluto? And I think that that's the question that we want to talk about tonight. And for it to be the planet, I'm of the same thinking as Tim. I call it a planet all the time because one thing, I'm a school teacher, and it really messed up the little saying of how you teach the planets. My very educated mother just served us 9 pies. Well, if you don't have the pies, then what are you going to say? My very educated mother just served us 9, whatever.
Just serve us
So,
nothing.
just served us nachos. We just served nachos. Served us nachos. But, so I will probably say planet tonight at some point because I mean, that sounds cool, thinking of Tim, not necessarily that I believe it is a planet, but that's just what I've always referred to it as. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, and we will try to be as brief as we can here.
All right. Well, as Sue talked about, this has been in the news lately. I want to go back a little bit in history. Asteris, Planetai, the wanderers. The Greeks were great astronomers. And the Greeks, as they observed the stars, noticed that some of the stars actually moved. They called them the stars Planetai, the wandering stars, from which our word planet originates. So the point of this is that this word planet has been in a state of flux for thousands of years. Does anybody know what this is?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Antikythera device.
There it is. Antikythera mechanism. This was discovered in 1901. It looks like a submarine door to me. That's what I thought of it when I looked at it. A pressure door submarine. Discovered in 1901 by some sponge divers off the coast of this island. And what was this for? Does anybody know? It's been a great mystery for about 1,000 years.
Yeah, I gave a talk on this one time, so I'll
Yes,
keep
sir.
my mouth shut.
Basically, it was a ancient analog computer, which they used, correct me if I'm wrong, to model the movement of the celestial objects that they observed. It was built somewhere around 150, 100 BC. The Europeans did not match this technology until the 14th century when they started building mechanical clocks. Pretty amazing device to think about that the Greeks were already thinking about, well, there's some sort of objects there that wander. We're going to call them Asteris Planetai. Interesting point, just a little trivia here. If you're a biblical scholar, since we're at Catholic University, the book of Jude. Jude, when he was writing, called false teachers who were straying from the pure doctrine, Asteris Planetai are wanderers. I thought that was an interesting little sideline. All right, so we're going to talk about the eyeball of the solar system, Pluto. Now, the definition of a moon is very clear. However, the definition of what constitutes a planet has changed over the years. Part of that is because as technology has evolved, we basically have discovered new planets. We've also discovered that Pluto is odd. All right, in 1609, Galileo first observed the 4 Galilean moons of Jupiter, and he thought perhaps they could be planets or wanderers. Well, in 1655, when Saturn's moon Titan was first observed, then they concluded, well, these are not planets, these are moons. In 1781, Herschel discovered Uranus, according to a law that really is not a law, Bode's law. Is anybody familiar with Bode's law? You are, sir. Okay, basically what Tycho Bode did, or Tycho developed this relationship, and Bode then wrote about it or stole the idea 6 years later. But if you take the numbers 0, 3, 6, double the numbers, 12, 24, 48, and you add 4 to them, and then divide them by 10, you come up with a relationship which gives astronomical units, and that seemed to predict the mean orbit of the classical planets. Okay, so for instance, it predicted fairly clearly where Mercury should be, where Venus should be, where Earth should be, where Mars should be, and Jupiter. So Uranus, it actually worked out fairly well for Uranus also. Okay? So what happened is, and they said, well, there's this gap between Mars and Jupiter. So according to this little law, which is not a law, but a relationship that Tycho figured out, there should be a planet between Mars and Jupiter. So they started to search for that. And that led to finding the asteroid Ceres, and later the sister asteroid Pallas. And so they initially thought these are actually planets. In fact, some of the astronomical books that were published at the time listed them as planets. However, later they concluded, well, we don't really think they're planets. There's something else. Well, William Herschel didn't want anybody else to discover any planets, so he came up with the name asteroid, which means starlight, because as they observed these asteroids through a telescope, they look like little stars. So they weren't planets. However, it's interesting, astronomy texts the first half of the 19th century list 11 planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Vesta, Juno, Ceres, Pallas, Jupiter, Saturn, and Herschel, which we now call Uranus. The U.S. Naval Observatory couldn't figure out what a planet was. It switched back and forth between the terms small planets and asteroids 4 times, talking about those objects between Mars and Jupiter between 1868 and 1929. That's fairly recently. And when was Pluto discovered? 1930. So in 1929, the Naval Observatory really wasn't sure what a planet was either. Even today, there's disagreement between astrophysicists and planetary scientists about what constitutes a planet. We're going to talk about that a little later. And then Sue's turn.
Okay. I'm going to talk just a little bit. This will be some of what Tim talked about. And when he told us who he was going to talk about, he said he hoped it was okay. And it's absolutely okay, because what I'm going to say is very brief in comparison to the details that he gave, which for me was very interesting, and I enjoyed it very much, Tim. So thank you for sharing that. But let me see if I can make this. Oh, yeah. Percival Lowell, and there's a picture of him, founded the Lowell Observatory to search for Planet X. He conducted this search until he died in the year 1916, so he actually did die a little bit before Pluto was discovered. The search for Planet X resumed in 1929 when the director of Lowell Observatory hired Clyde Tombaugh, and Tim gave us all the details about that, about how he came to work there. And Tombaugh's task was to image the night sky in pairs of photos taken 2 weeks apart using a machine called a blink comparator. He rapidly shifted back and forth between each plate to create the illusion of movement of objects changing position. And Tim did a good job at showing that kind of what that was quite a task, I would agree, at that time. But on February the 18th, 1930, he discovered a possible moving object, which was the planet Pluto. And Tim showed us these same pictures, and he was actually, I can't make them blink, but he actually made them blink. But I thought it was very interesting that, between January 23rd and January 29th, you could see the movement that Tim showed earlier. And then on, what was the date? They said on February the 18th, he discovered a possible moving object. So I guess he had made even more photos, or of course it wasn't like today, instant photography. He had to wait a little while before he could actually view those photos. So the planet Pluto was discovered in early 1930. Next, we're going to talk about how Pluto got its name. The name Pluto was proposed by a young girl, Venetia Burney. She was 11 years old, and she was a schoolgirl in Oxford, England, who was interested in astronomy and in mythology. When the planet Pluto was discovered, it made headlines across the globe. The Lowell Observatory, which had the right to name the planet, received over 1,000 suggestions of names from all over the world for the new planet. But the name Pluto, after the god of the underworld, was proposed by Venetia Burney, and she, like I said, is an 11-year-old girl from Oxford, England. And Pluto was officially named on March the 24th by a unanimous vote of the members of the Lowell Observatory. They proposed 3 names on the ballot. They proposed Minerva, which was already the name for an asteroid, Cronus, which had lost reputation through being proposed by unpopular astronomer Thomas Jefferson Jackson C., and Pluto. And I couldn't find anywhere exactly how many people voted on that name, but it was unanimous. 100% of the people voted on that. And then Venetia Burney did receive a reward for choosing the winning name. She was rewarded 5 British pounds, which as of today it says that would be worth about 276 pounds that compared to then. And I don't know what that comparison would be in US dollars, I have no idea. But anyway, the name was soon embraced by a wider culture, and then in 1930, Walt Disney introduced a canine companion for Mickey Mouse named Pluto. The name was embraced by Walt Disney, and then not just Walt Disney, but also in 1941, Glenn Seaborg named the newly created element plutonium after Pluto. So the name has become, I guess that's why people have had so much problem with letting go of Pluto, because it's been very endearing. Okay, Terry?
We didn't mention, but when we were coming in today through the gate, the guy at the gate asked, "What is your favorite planet?" And I don't know why he does this, but every time I come in, he asks me this. The first time I came in 3 months ago, I said, "Pluto." He goes, "Pluto's not a planet." He said, "Well, maybe not." So the next month I came in, "What's your favorite planet?" I said, "Pluto." He goes, "Pluto is not a planet." So last month we came in and he said, "What is your favorite planet?" I said, "Uranus." He goes, "Go." Tonight I asked him, "What is your favorite planet?" And he said,
Earth.
"Jupiter." And he said, most people would come and say Jupiter, and I am just a sheep, and so I'm going to say Jupiter also. But every family has one. Do y'all have one of these? Now, I was in college in 1970s. My roommate in college, Jeff, had one of these things called a leisure suit. He thought he was the coolest guy who ever lived. He would wear this leisure suit all the time. But every family has one, and this is the weird uncle. Pluto's the weird uncle of the solar system, wearing a leisure suit and squirting a flower in the lapel, or you're sitting there at Thanksgiving dinner and he goes, "Pull my finger." And you go, "No." Okay. So Pluto's weird. It's unusual. It's the oddball of the solar system. It's smaller than some of the solar system's moons. But so is Mercury, but Earth has 456 times as much mass as Pluto. Pluto's rotational axis is weird. It's tipped so steeply that for part of the year the sun rises in the south and sets in the north. Its orbit is weird. It's 257 years. Do you realize that Pluto was discovered in 1930? So it has not even made 1 year, Plutonian year, orbit around the sun since we discovered it. I think that's weird. Pluto has, I meant to correct this. This just came out. Pluto has 5 moons now, not 4 moons. But one of those moons could be considered a planet also, or a dwarf planet, Charon. Charon and Pluto actually have an orbit, the center of their orbit is outside of Pluto, just slightly. So in other words, some people say these are actually binary planets. That's a little bit strange. Pluto has an atmosphere of frozen nitrogen, methane, carbon monoxide. Part of the year they think it's frozen of its year, and part of the year when it's closer to the sun it forms an atmosphere. However, I read just this week that they found out that the atmosphere of Pluto is actually thicker or more dense than they thought it was, which I find is interesting. Its orbit, this is probably the weirdest thing of all, its orbit is tipped 17 degrees from the solar system's elliptical plane. And there are other objects now out there in the Kuiper Belt that follow this similar orbit. And you know what they call them?
Asteroids.
No, sir. Plutinos. Because they have a similar orbit. Here's the problem.
So the problem that, since we've been reading a little bit more about this, and actually it's not really, like I said, it's not a debate, is Pluto a planet or not? The problem comes down to our sorting. And sorting is something that we all do every day. Kids learn it. I'm an early childhood education teacher. That's how we start our math concepts. We teach children to divide things by colors and shapes and sizes and put them in groups. We do it at home. We put our cups in one place and our plates in one place, and we put our clothes in one place, and we put our books in one place. So we sort our things. We do it at work. We put our pile of stuff to do and our pile of stuff we've done and the pile of stuff that we're working on, and we have all of our office supplies in one place. We sort this is not a new word for many of you, but for me, this was a brand new vocabulary word, so I was thrilled. Scientists do it, and it's called taxonomy. And it's not only in the field of planets and the solar system, but it's taxonomy when it's flowers or when it's bugs or anything that has to do with science that has a classification or a sorting. It's taxonomy. And that's the problem, that the way of classifying or sorting planets has evolved and changed over time as we've learned more and as technology has evolved. But the never-ending debate, not is it a planet or is it not, but in which bucket does it fit? When we're sorting these objects in space, is it an asteroid? Is it a planet? Is it a Plutino? It can't be because Plutinos are named after Pluto. But where does Pluto fit? Well, because we weren't quite sure of that, or someone wasn't quite sure of that, Pluto was demoted. And as the cartoon says, Pluto is declared to be a dwarf planet. Now, what does that mean? I mean, a planet is a planet. If you have a big ball or a little ball, it's a ball. If you have I have a miniature poodle. A big poodle, a miniature poodle. They're all poodles. So what is the difference in a planet and a dwarf planet? But according to Pluto, so we would prefer to be called little planets. No. In 1992, the astronomers began to find small icy objects beyond Neptune that were similar to Pluto, which is now called the Kuiper Belt. And in 2006, the IUA came up with their official definition of what is a planet. How are we going to use our taxonomy or sort to decide what is a planet? And the definition is this: a body that circles the sun, is large enough to be rounded by its own gravity, and has cleared its neighborhood of most other orbiting objects. And that was the problem. Pluto shares orbital space with lots of other Kuiper Belt objects, and therefore it didn't make the cut. So, at that time, a new word has been added, or since that time, a new word has been added to our English vocabulary. And it is, whoops, how do I go back?
I'll do that.
Back way. Pluto, which means to denote or devalue something as happened to the former planet Pluto. How many of you have ever been Plutoed? I have. A time or two, a few things. Okay, Terry?
All right, so as Sue said, as technology evolves, and the interesting thing was, and I meant to say this, is that Uranus and Neptune were only discovered by telescopes. They were the first planets discovered by telescopes. The Kuiper Belt now has been discovered because of technology. All right, that blink comparator that we talked about, that's how they're finding all these objects in the Kuiper Belt. But what they're doing is they're doing it digitally. You don't have some person sitting there all day. You have a computer that can sit there forever and compare pictures, and it's going, wow, we found an object here, an object here, an object here, an object here. But Houston, we got a problem. As soon as the IAU came up with their definition of what a planet was, technology's finding strange new worlds, and we don't know where they fit in the bucket of taxonomy. For instance, we got the hot Jupiters, or the scorchers. In other words, these are gas planets similar to Neptune, but they're orbiting suns closer than the orbit of Mercury. Those don't fit with what we think of as planets. Are they planets? What are they? And then we have my favorite thing. There's no place like home, road planets. We've discovered, and Neil deGrasse Tyson has theorized that there are billions of rogue planets. Rogue planets are worlds who are out there without a star. What a miserable place. No sunrise, no sunset, nothing.
Cold.
Sir?
Cold.
Cold. Cold. But here's the odd thing. Neil deGrasse Tyson killed Pluto, but let me read you what he said in this the film Cosmos that he just came out with about these rogue planets. I had to take this because if I was a lawyer, I'd go get him. Rogue planets are molten at the core but frozen at the surface. He calls them planets. Now I'm really confused there, Neil. You said Pluto's not a planet, but now you're saying these are planets. So what the heck is a planet? So where's God you going to put these? I don't know. In fact, planetary, I saw an interview with a planetary geologist, and they asked him, what's a planet? He says, I don't have the foggiest idea. It's pretty interesting. July 2015. New Horizons will give us the first close-ups of the look at Pluto. This is exciting. I'm glad that hopefully we'll all be alive to see that. That's pretty exciting to think. We will be the first people to really see what the surface of Pluto looks like. The camera that's going to go around, that's going to make the approach, is so good that if it was approaching Earth, it'd be able to pick out individual buildings. So we're going to really have an idea what Pluto looks like. That's just a picture of the Kuiper Belt, and as we talked about, you can see the orbit of Pluto there versus the orbit of the rest of the solar system, the elliptical. And basically, they're finding now in the Kuiper Belt that there's they found hundreds of thousands of objects greater than 100 kilometers. So, you know what I like to think of Pluto as? Pluto is the sentinel of the outer solar system. Yes, planet program, if Pluto wants to be a citizen of the solar system, it better straighten out its orbit and act like the rest of us. I can't believe I have to sit at the little planet's table.
As I said in the beginning, it's very strange that the furthest planet in our solar system, Pluto, and also the smallest planet, has caused so much talk and so much interest, even in people that have never been interested in astronomy. I mean, ever since, I think that when Pluto was Plutoed, demoted, I think really and truly that probably made as much headline nearly as when it was discovered. I mean, for real, I really think it did. And this is just to show you the effect, the way that the public reaction has been. As we can see here, of course, we have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Which is, guys, according to this man from the International Astronomical Union, we're going to have to make room for one more. So we might have to join them. This one, my saying that I said we always use at school, my very educated mother just served us 9 pies to learn the planets in order, but it has to be changed now to my very educated morons just screwed up numerous planetariums. And that's probably true. And the letter says, from sweet Madeline Trost, dear scientists, what do you call Pluto if it's not a planet anymore? If you make it a planet again, all the science books will be right. Do people live on Pluto? If there are people who live there, they won't exist. Why can't Pluto be a planet? If it's small, doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be a planet anymore. Some people like Pluto. If it doesn't exist, then they don't have a favorite planet. That would be me. Please write back, but not in cursive, because I can't read cursive. So dwarf planets are not officially full-fledged planets. So Pluto was stripped of its of the status that it held from 1930. School children were outraged and wrote tear-stained letters to astronomers. The Baltimore Sun ran an editorial from the planet itself saying, "What did I do to deserve this?" Pluto moans. I, Pluto, am taking a stand. I'm here. I'm a sphere. Get used to it. The New Mexico legislature passed a new law declaring Pluto a planet went over New Mexico. It's a sloppy definition. It's bad science. It ain't over, said Alan Stern, head of the NASA probe to Pluto. We have another one here. Dear Natural History Museum, you are missing planet Pluto. Please make a model of it. This is what it looks like. It is a planet. And says, please turn the page, and so on the other side there, he has his drawing of Pluto just to help them out. Okay.
Oh, in space, no one can hear you protest. Now, what are we getting at here? We're going back to the scientists now, and this is pretty funny though. Pluto's priceless. What would Walt do? He'd buy Pluto. That's interesting. Some scientists feel the IAU planet definition fundamentally flawed. One scientist said, I thought this was interesting. He must be an English guy. He said, we have an adjective modifying an adjective. I'm like, well, I don't know what that has to do with it, but that's what he said. Alan Stern, I wouldn't say he's necessarily a impartial scientist, since he's the lead scientist of the New Horizons probe. But he says if you take the IAU's definition strictly, no object in the solar system is a planet, since no planet entirely cleared its zone. The definition also sets a different standard for planethood at different distances from the sun. The farther away from the sun a planet is, the bigger it has to be to clear its orbit. Okay? And if Earth circled the sun in Uranus's orbit, it wouldn't be able to clear its neighborhood. So we wouldn't be a planet anymore. It's kind of like I'm going to tell you what your car is on the basis of how the traffic around you is behaving. Captain Kirk, where are you? All right. Now, what we're getting at here is this. You're Captain Kirk. You go into orbit. You turn to Spock. You say, Spock, what is it? And he turns the view screen on and he says, looks like a planet. And that's actually what Alan Stern suggested. He said, I think we should use this definition. Is it round? Does it look like a planet? It's a planet.
Now you're probably thinking, what on earth does this have to do with anything? How many of you have seen, I'm sure everyone has seen, the movie Miracle on 34th Street. It's one of my favorite holiday time movies. In that movie, there is a particular scene that helps determine that there really is a Santa Claus. Who can tell me what that is? Does anybody know? A scene at the end of the movie that is the clincher, that's, oh yes, this is the proof that there is a Santa Claus. And who does that? The United States Postal Service. Because all the letters that came addressed to just Santa Claus were rightly delivered to Santa Claus. Because the U.S. Postal Service believed this person does exist. So, 1991, the United States Postal Service unveiled a series of steps exploring the solar system, and every planet was paired with a probe except for poor little Pluto. But there is a stamp.
But there is a stamp. Planetary scientists calling themselves the Pluto Underground began to drum up support for a mission to what they considered the last unexplored planet. January 2006, the New Horizons probe was launched. Now, I don't know, maybe there's a discrepancy here, Tim. What I read was, Clyde Tombaugh's family and Bernie were at the launch of the New Horizons. She's since passed. But I thought that was pretty interesting. You named it, we're sending it in 2006. It's going to take 8 years, and you're invited to the launch.
Well, Clyde was there too.
Clyde was there too.
In Ashes.
A bit of him, yeah.
Okay. This is an interview with Alan Stern, the lead scientist for the New Horizons. I'll let you read that. I think it's pretty interesting. So you're the principal investigator. And he says, right, even with the Hubble Space Telescope, Pluto's little smudgy dot with the various surface features are all we can see. So once we have real data on what Pluto looks like, are you hoping they'll restore its title as a planet? And then Alan Stern said, I think when people see Pluto revealed by New Horizons, its satellite system, its complex surface, its atmosphere, I think they'll have a hard time saying that's not a planet, because it obviously will be. And I think most people are already coming to that opinion anyway. But I think that's really going to drive it home viscerally. Sort of the Star Trek test in action. It will be the Star Trek test in action. Here's some interesting pictures. This was taken by New Horizons. There's Pluto, and here's its 5 moons. This is Charon, almost as big as Pluto. And the center of the orbit between these two would actually be outside the surface of Pluto. So that's kind of interesting. And just to sum it up, we have something to sum this whole thing up with. And it takes about 3 minutes.
And it says everything we've already said in 3 minutes.
And it was kind of hurt to see that middle school kids put this together. It's called the Pluto Rap Battle. So let's watch this real quick. And we will be done.
Battles. Got a question that's been on all of our minds. What is going on with Pluto? As usual, write your questions in the comments below. You stick around for the credits. I'll be back to give you some more information about how to get involved. Enjoy.
Since the 30s, Pluto's been an oddball. Check it sorted out. Where you let you go? Kinda touch too much on me, couldn't go until Neptune is gonna get crossed soon. Staring at Sharon, pretty big for a moon.
Well, I think it's great. Why you gotta hate going on the sun, having fun like the other eight? Pluto's still a planet is our desire. It's big, it's round, and it's not on fire. And I mean whatever we mean when we mean it. If it's big, it's round, we know it when we see it.
Huh. What an interesting theory. You ever heard of this planet called Ceres? Thought we had a new planet, 1801. Found more and more stuff, but it was no fun for the kids to memorize all the planets in the sky with the never-ending list piling up sky high. Too many planets, people got annoyed. So now, we just call them asteroids.
Ceres, whatever. What's your planet got to be?
Pluto is a series of the 21st century.
I'm not buying it, man. I'm not budging. Pluto's a planet. I know it because I love it.
Planet Pluto, you already know. Dwarf planet now, hate to break it to you. Pluto when it's very far away, far away, far away. It's tiny, it's icy, and its orbit's kind of crazy. But it's rule number 3 that it just doesn't obey. A bunch of Kuiper stuff is in its way. Dwarf planet, what's up? What new? Scopes, there was a typhoon of new objects found past Neptune. Pluto was still the big daddy until they found it was just a little more fatty.
So, was that planet number 10?
Nope, cause that would just extend the future planet list up higher and higher.
They're big, they're round, they're not on fire.
But think about Ceres, same sort of story. Pluto's one of many new dwarf planets.
Sorry, but a dwarf planet's still a planet, right?
Nope, cause the belt of Kuiper is just way too crowded. 7 kid rocks floating all around it.
Man, sometimes I hate science.
You got 4 terrestrials and 4 gas giants and 2 belts, asteroid and Kuiper, y'all. So it's not a planet, but it's not an oddball. And the universe is an incredible place.
Mean very evil man, just sure enough named.
Yeah, planet not Pluto, you already know. Dwarf planet now, hate to break it to you. Pluto when it's very far away, far away, far away. It's tiny, it's icy, and its orbit's kind of crazy. But it's rule number 3 that it just doesn't obey. A bunch of Kuiper stuff is in its way. Dwarf planet, what's up?
Planet on Pluto, you already know. Dwarf planet now, but it's still kind of cool. It's very far away, far away, far away. Though it's tiny, it's icy, and it's over kind of quick. Learning more about the universe every single day. We'll keep on learning till we're all there and great. Dwarf planet, what's up?
Incredible arguments made here today.
I thought that was pretty good. Any questions for us? The reason we did this presentation, another idea, is we're going to offer this to go to schools and present this, and that's why we kind of presented it the way we did, to try to get some kids interested in this type of thing. And Pluto seemed to be one that would be easy to do. So we'll take any critiques you have on that, and we're going to offer this to schools. And that's all we got. Tim?
Well, thank you very much. That was great. I forgot how great you guys make all this debate down to earth here, so to speak. So thank you once again. Just a reminder, pay your dues. Our next observing session is the 18th, followed by the partial solar eclipse on the 23rd, and another dark sky observing on the 25th of this month. That's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's attention and participation tonight. Thank you.